Okay, good afternoon. We will start this week's Internet Forum public lecture series here in Aalto University in Otaniemi. Welcome both of you here in lecture hall as well as you who are watching this via internet. And as you know, the recordings of these lectures will come available to internet a little bit later. But for example, the last week's presentations are already to be seen in internet, and you can easily find the link for that in the Internet Forum web page. Today, once again, we have two lectures, excellent ones as well. Sanna Pekari is the Chief Digital Officer in Normet, and she will start by lecturing about the digital business. So warm welcome, Sanna. Excellent to have you here. Please.
Thank you. Okay, good. Digital business, that's quite a wide area, and I kind of want to really make this as active, interactive as possible. So we start with the video, and watch the video, and where do we have it? Okay, if you can operate it, because this kind of goes over my skills and competencies. What I'm planning to go through today is my practical examples, my experience, what I have done around the digital business. And I hope that after this presentation, it gives you some tools and aspects to think about what is digital business. Because there is a lot of kind of fuss about it, and there's a lot of opinions about it. And this is, of course, this is my opinion, what the digital business is. But let's watch the movie first. All right. Who of you thinks this is a digital business, that what you are seeing? One? Okay. So only one person thinks that this is an example, good example of the digital business. Let's now kind of go through a little bit more through the questions. So these are the questions that I'm kind of planning to explain today. The first thing is that let's look on how fast different industries are moving into the digitalizations. What are kind of the drivers and trends, threats and opportunities? That will be number one. Then we continue with the right business model. So how do we actually could operate in a digital business? What are the competitive advances, capabilities, and then finally we talk a little bit about the leadership. Leadership is something which is actually my personal favorite, so we most probably will use some time on it. So if we take the first about what are the true threats and opportunities. As you saw, I come from the mining industry. So mining industry, if you have seen the Gardner curves, it's actually the second last on the digitalization. We are not yet there. We have started, we have fuss, we have opportunities, but we are not yet digitalized as an industry. I joined Normet 2 years ago, and I was eager to basically digitalize the whole mining industry. I was looking these big equipments as a car, And I was thinking about, hey, why can we not have a predictive maintenance? Why can we not kind of optimize the drivers so that they can actually operate the mines in a best way? And actually the best thing was that we were collecting the data from the equipment. So what did I do? As a young person in a job, I created IoT platform. We got all the data in, we actually developed the first algorithms, and then we went for the Russian customer to sell the services. We had the really good value proposition. We were kind of working with the value proposition with our sales organizations for a couple months to really nail it down, to offer something for the customer. There I was with the iPad, and in my iPad I had the algorithms to see that how they can optimize the equipment and their fleets. The first thing I came to the Siberia, it was cold, it was snowy, and the customers was there said, hey, don't use that door because there's too much snow, so we have to go round to the house. And then I saw there was no isolation, there was -20 inside the house, there was no place to actually hang on your iPad, there was nobody with any kind of electricity in the whole building. I was thinking, okay, I have this marvelous digital services and solution that really kind of improves the customer performance, but they were not yet ready there. So that's why, basically, when we look for the digital business, you have to look at it from the 4 different aspects. Because technology was ready, so it was quite easy to kind of get the cloud computing and all the data analytics working and the data, etc. So that was there. And that kind of gave me personally a speed and the urgency to change. Competitors, you can look for the Sandvik or Epiroc. They were moving as fast. They were just launching those preventing maintenance services or optimized technologies. So we were kind of going hand in hand. Customer was actually asking to have IoT solutions. They have heard, most probably from their headquarters, they were pushed down that, hey, you have to take the first step in the digitalization as well. But actually something was missing. And the something was that the industry or environment was not ready for those services yet. I got frustrated as a person that, hey, what's happening? And I actually got an advice from my colleagues saying that, hey, keep your eyes open. You need to see that the whole picture when your industry is ready to be digitalized. Second thing is that when we are ready, when we know all the components are ready, and of course other industries are already ready, thinking about banking. Banking has a lot of threats. Every company, grocery stores, and everybody has actually online banking services. So there is all the things, all the threats exist, and they need to move fast. But in our industry, it's not yet there. But it doesn't mean that we should kind of stop here and stop developing the digitalization and wait until they have isolation in the houses, etc. So of course we continue working on this topic. The other thing was that we had this marvelous iPad about the fleet optimization and performance optimization on my hand. And I thought, okay, maybe Russia, they are not that advanced. Let's go to the more advanced markets. I went for the UK. Visited the mine called Tara Mines. Got really kind of excited audience about all the nice things, all the reports, all the dashboards, everything. And it was silent for 1 hour. I was explaining and explaining and explaining. And then I got a question, only one question from my customer. And the question was, that looks nice, but I'm not actually interested about only Normet equipment. I want to have all my fleet. Can your solution support that? And again, I was packing my bag and going back to headquarters to further develop our digital services and offering. So the next thing when we need to look is, you have all seen this as a kind of, we talk about customer centricity, we talk about customer experience, customer values. But that's actually, it's the most important thing, is that you need to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Look at how does actually the process look from the customer point of view. And we didn't kind of do that. It was a kind of silly mistake, and we learned, But this is something that we have now learned. And how do we kind of use, so these, most probably these copy-paste are something that is familiar for you. I would really advise, because they are good tools to actually document and illustrate the customer journey. What are the touch points? When are actually customer needing your support, needing your help? And also about the business canvas to really capture the value. But don't use business canvas only once. Use it twice or 3 times. The first time you actually document the most obvious. Yes, my customer wants to have a fleet optimized. They want to have the service available for 99% of the time. But when you actually take it the next time, you start seeing that what other things customer values. So what is actually the other activities that are as important for the customer as our activities are. And then you can start seeing about what are the really threats. Who else is actually offering the similar services or similar solutions to the customer? This works well if you think about that you will be buying a car. You will buy a car and the values that you are looking most probably is the safety. It's about maybe a status symbol. It's about moving from one location to another location. If you only take those 3 characteristics and think about solutions, you will have enormous amount of the different solutions that you can think about. You have taxis, you have buses, you have actually home delivery of the food. And that kind of gives you an understanding a little bit more from the wider perspective, where the customer actually is valuing and what the customers are valuing. Now, when we know that basically that, okay, we are going ahead, this is our speed, how we want to kind of enter into the markets. We know about what are the customer values on the digital services, what is really the sweet spot, that what customer doesn't want to buy is actually the fleet management. Customer wants to buy an uptime. They want to see that their machines are working fully at the mine whenever needed. Then we need to select, basically position, that okay, how do we solve this customer problem? If we say that customer machine has to be available when they need, and they have to be kind of available so that it's actually that when they only have one equipment and they can use it, so it's not broken, it's not available, it's not lost. Then we need to think about, okay, how do we actually develop that solution and that business, digital business? Do we actually focus on our product? And do we just make it faster, cheaper? A little bit about fine-tuning that maybe we put a GPS so that the customer knows where the equipment is and it's easy for them to find? Or do we kind of plug and play? Do we kind of look into the ecosystem, that what else is existing in mines? They have a mine planning system. Okay, should we actually just give our information to that mine planning system? And customer can get that information through their main solutions. Or actually, are we kind of building, or what, do we want to be leaders of the ecosystems? So do we want to build a platform that we are inviting everybody else in? And we are kind of building complementary services. Because with the mines, yes, we have the fleets there, but we have the canteen there, we have the material available. So is that the kind of direction where we are heading? Because it's very important to select that how you build the digital services and solutions. You cannot actually select all, because then it will be messy and you don't really have a strategy. So, where we are at the moment now, we have market, we have customer solutions, and we know how we are going to deliver or build the digital services. Does that make us a different? Will that bring some kind of advance to Normet? My experience in this area is that when you look at the big companies that I have used to work earlier, the digitalization was seeing something like isolated activity. There was a lot of digital development done, and actually now after a couple of years, they are just apps They are totally isolated from their normal business, and they were not kind of bringing the value or the revenue that was expected. I just heard today that there was from my company, the treasury manager was saying that actually the amount of the investments that companies are doing on the digitalization are far from paying off. And most probably this is the topic, competitive advance. And that basically means that you are building in top of your company assets. And this is hard discussions on the leadership team and on a board of directors. When you're really discussing that what is your company's competitive advance, it's not something material, because everybody can copy-paste your equipment, everybody can copy-paste your software. So what is really your competitive advance? And that's immaterial. So it's about relations that we have with the customers. Some of those customers we have worked for 40 years. There's a certain trust already exists. How do we actually build on that? Or there could be some products or services that actually we have got an experience, how the equipments are used, what are the most common challenges what our customers are having. Those are the competitive advantages that I advise that we are actually building the digital services top of. Not on material, not on existing products, not as isolated, because then they will become as just another app. So what next? All the companies are actually looking to have new capabilities, new resources, new technology. And as an IT person, I would say that the easy thing is that you go and buy some software and that's it. You have the capability of data analytics, you have capability of the blockchain. But that's not the most important capability that you need when you are building digital services. This is it. So how do you kind of build a value networks? Because when you are building digital services, you have to go out from your comfort zone. So if you look us as a company, I have my assets, my information, but with the digital services, you need to start connecting with your vendors, because you have to have the material available when you need it. You need to actually connect with your competitors, like in this case with the Tara mines, that it's better to share than actually be out of the game. You need to go even further from those that are close to your ecosystem or landscape, customers, vendors, suppliers, communities. You need to step to the customer ecosystems and networks. Like in our case, when we are kind of building or spraying concrete into the tunnels, one of the important stakeholder for us to build the ecosystem of services is actually architects. Because that's something that we need to offer something for the architects to make their lives easier, which will kind of benefit us when they are in the design and development area. So building a value networks is an important aspect, but it's also one of the hardest. Believe of companies that has been competing with each other for last 25 years or 10 years, how do you actually operate with that type of company? And that comes back to the leadership. How you kind of see that you have open co-creating environment with all of those stakeholders that you have actually never ever spoken, and you have actually been protecting your IP rights. And now you should actually open up and work with those guys. So that's a tough discussion within the businesses. Then of course, technology. This is the technology set that what we are mainly using in the mine industry. So of course IoT sensors are the key thing. So I think in our equipments they are underground. They are doing spraying processes or drilling processes. We have enormous amount of the sensors that we are collecting the data. We don't know yet all what we will do with the data, but that's kind of the crucial number one, is to get as much information as possible. Then of course robotics, it's another thing. Underground as well as all other industries, they go with autonomous operations. So how much we can actually replace existing mechanical things with the robotics. Artificial intelligence, augmented reality are of course the must. So augmented reality we actually use to train our people to do the better spraying jobs. So it's our training tool, but it's also about the maintenance tool so that we can actually centrally guide our field service engineers to do the right repairs and maintenance. Wearables and mobiles are something that when you are in the underground, you have a plus 40 degrees. Your hands are with oil. You don't really kind of have anything. So you have to have a communication channels that actually hangs on your body there. And that's why kind of that has been selected as one of the key technologies. And surprisingly, API management, because we are the world that we are integrating with anybody and with anything at the moment. So those are the capabilities that what we are looking. And to my last point, leadership. Leadership is crucial, but leadership also actually makes me a little bit angry. Because we do this revolution again, I think this is the third or fourth time. And actually, as a humans, we have not learned anything. We are taking people as a granted. We are not leading. If you look for the tech talks, because I did that, before this presentation, I watched tens of different tech talks. I was looking for the MIT, Stanford University, because I was looking something food for the thought, how actually digitalization and leadership goes hand in hand. I found nice talks about building networks, creating trustworthy organizations, cooperating, co-creating together, but not really about the leadership. What is the future leadership required for the digital services? One first thing is, and this is something, then I realized that maybe digitalization actually is not different. You don't need to lead people differently, or you don't need to have a different leadership if you are talking about traditional business or digital business. You need still these 4 elements. Vision. Vision has to be something which is transformative. Normally, if you look for the companies, their vision is to be the best place, the customer delights. That doesn't tell where you're heading. It has to be a vision that actually says that, like we say, we are making mines as a safetiest place on the earth. And that's driving all our development, that safety comes first, and all the operational improvements, operational efficiency improvements are done so that people can be safe underground. The second thing is engagements. So in a digitalization and building digital services, it's about the transformation. It's a transformation where basically you need to connect the organization, because the digital service winner, or the company that wins in the digital era, is actually the company that gets a leadership that can connect the teams. Anything that you build on the digital, you need IT, you need business, you need equipment, you need services, you need the chemical, you need the finance. You really need to build a team around the digitalization. The second thing is, or the third thing is actually the governance. A couple years ago, maybe 5 years ago, everybody was saying that, okay, with the digital services, don't put governance on it. Just kind of go wild, innovate. But actually governance is now needed to see that we are executing, delivering, and also that we go actually use exactly the same principles as we use with other business developments. We need to see that we have customers that are buying our solutions. We see that we are putting the right value proposition on place. We have the earning methods, and we know that how we are kind of funding it. Exactly the same principles than we know any other businesses. And then the technology leadership. And this is funny when you look for the Finnish companies. Any company you could see that it's around 50 to 60-year-old man or woman leading that company, that how actually they know about the technology leadership. But that's crucial because only by knowing the technology, you know what is the possibility that technology brings to you in your industry, with your competitive advantages, with your customer base. So that's kind of my takeaway that, okay, these are the important things for the leadership as such. Let's look another film, and then I will ask you exactly the same question. Is this a digital business?
Panostuspäivä, niin silloin panostetaan tämmöisellä Normetin panostuslaitteella, joka on nyt tällä hetkellä meidän 2012 tehty. Ja niin se tuotanto on siitä kiinni, että se pelaa. Että se on meidän ainut panostuslaite.
Normet's preventive maintenance service program has been developed to ensure that the operations of mine are running without any delays in its production. Pyhäsalmi mine is a perfect example of how the preventive maintenance program keeps the processes running.
Käyttöosuus, no se on 100% melkein.
Ei ole varakonetta, niin se on koko ajan töissä ja oltava kunnossa. Ja tietysti huollot on tehtävä tietysti siihen 100% vielä sisälle.
Normet on ihan hyvin jättänyt koulutuksessa, että niitä on vielä työmaileukkoja, jos on ollut 3 kysyttävää, niin siinä on ihan tullut miehet auttamaan sitä mukaan. Että kun on käyttänyt vanhaa ja uutta Normettia, niin se on se toimintavarmuus kummassakin, että huolettu oikein, niin se kestää sitten.
No, tärkeä on tämä varaosien saatavuus, että se toimii hyvin, että saadaan tarvittaessa tehtaalta sitten pikatoimituksena. Laitteet on pitkään töissä, että vaikka 10 vuotta, niin se on aika tärkeää, että ne on hyviä huolta ja korjata.
No se on huolenpito näistä vanhasta kalustosta, joka meillä toimii vieläkin niin kuin tuli terät. Että kyllä mä oon tyytyväinen niin kuin asiakassuhteeseen ollut aina.
Of those was about the digital services. Who thought that this was more close to the digital services than the first film was? Those one who doesn't kind of lift the hands, you have to stay here because you have to kind of hear my story again. This was exactly what the digital services are. They are for the customer benefits. It's not about the technology, it's not about AI, it's all about the customer benefits, and therefore I would vote for the second film. Still, let's close. I was kind of a little bit running. I most probably forgot to tell something. To closing words. Digital business is business. Every business is a digital business. It's to select that where to play and how to win in the digital era and when. So basically, in the digital world, you can win by rethinking value propositions, meaning that instead of selling equipment, you sell availability. So that's a value proposition. You promise to customer that there's a certain availability times. It's about reconfiguring delivery models, meaning that we could sell equipment by an hour. Most probably our customers don't need our equipment every day. So they could buy it by hour, and that's kind of our offering. It could be about substituting products and services, meaning that what if we actually would sell our services per sprayed concrete instead of operating hour about availability, but also combining the materials and also securing that the outcome will matter. Or it could be actually reinventing the whole industry. And we were the last ones to transform. I cannot imagine this yet. But most probably there will be somebody we will disrupt, and they will bring equipment or they will bring services that will change the whole mine industry. But I cannot imagine this yet. So this is for me the digital services or digital business. Sorry, I was a little bit fast. I hope that's still okay. So any questions? Use my experience on what I have done and what I have learned. So, yeah.
Service, or did you called or requested by the customer to implement the digital service to cater their need?
I would say that I have not seen an industry who has not had fussle about the digitalization. So it was our customers wanted to see what innovations or what digitalizations we have and what we have invented. So it was coming from the customer. And it was also so mainly that was a driver that and there's already cases where the customer we cannot enter into the RFP without having a digital services as an offering. Currently it's just a machine data, it's about those maintenance data, but still that's something that what we see as a kind of increasing trends that our customers wants to have it.
Would involve integrating a lot of different components. Now, almost every company is built in a different way, so those components that need to be integrated, those assets that you build on, are going to be different for every customer. Most tech companies are built on, you develop a product and then you can distribute it to multiple customers because its production cost is zero, you just copy it, and this way you scale. But building on the assets of a single customer doesn't seem scalable. What's your thought on that?
Maybe I didn't kind of fully got when I was talking about assets, immaterial assets. That was our assets in Normet, and what we have kind of seen the trend is that 2 years ago we got requests to integrate into every equipment at the equipment level, and I fully agree that was not scalable because every machine that goes out from the production is different. But now basically the customers has mature and we have kind of normal service integration layers where we are kind of transferring the data. But that is still I would say that one of the places where we are putting development effort whenever we are integrating with the customers. But we are moving from the hardware to the software integrations now, or we actually don't do any hardware integrations anymore. So, and of course, I don't know. I hope that you have somebody who is actually studying automation technology, because that's an area where I would see that they need a lot of software engineers in the future. They are going on in the transformation or even transition, moving from the hardware-driven to the software-driven. Exactly the same revolution that happened for the IT 10 to 15 years ago, and they need definitely now to adapt fast on this digitalization.
Yeah. So. I'd like to know, on your route to digital transformation of the services offered in Normet, aside the different challenges which you have enumerated earlier on, there's often this notion that when you're moving towards digitalization, especially for construction and mining companies, you have these old employees who are not really used to the softwares and things like that. Did you face any sort of resistance from them, and how do you overcome these sort of challenges?
I actually have a nice example, not from the Normet, but the company I worked earlier. That was Stora, and so that's a pulp and paper. So there was a pulp mill, and basically all the pulp mills are in places far away from the urban areas. And many of the employees have a long history there and they are close to the retirement. And our target was to create an advisory that they can know what the pulp quality is. And we were exactly thinking about that, how do you educate a person that has not worked with the computers, it's closer to the retirement age. And then the only solution was that actually we invited those guys already on the design. We made it as easy and kind of used their logic on the user interface, so that after kind of the pilot period, they say that, hey, this is easy to use, this is for us. I think we are, in IT, we are normally kind of making certain things too complex. We are creating portals because we believe that everybody goes to the computer and works there. But that's why those devices are most kind of crucial. Because when you're operating mine, you don't want to look on your PC that something goes wrong. You want to get a light, you want to get an SMS, you want to get voice. You want to get the information through all the different channels. But I guess there is always the trust issue with the data. But I would say that data analytics is as good as your best engineer is, so I am not able to achieve it, that it's better than your best guy is. So. And that's how we start. With a good data analytics, we can be as good as your best experts are.
So basically it's defining the user interface.
Yeah. Yeah, and also thinking about what is kind of the natural way of taking orders or taking information in. The PC or mobile app is not the only one. There's a lot of other opportunities to take the information in. And the only information that is needed during that process. Not overcomplicate by delivering too much information.
I have to say, Sanna, that when I'm thinking about personally, digital business, mind business is not the one that comes first to my mind. Two short questions from my side. First of all, when this position, Chief Digital Officer, was established in Normet?
That was established 2 years ago when I joined.
Okay. And I really liked in your presentation that you emphasized also that the importance of the leadership in this field. So how would you summarize or simplify when you are thinking about the business leadership and digital business leadership? What's the main difference?
I think the only kind of difference is the technology. That understanding the opportunity and not because in a business leadership we are all led by the quarter results or next year's budget results. So it's quite very short-term leadership what we are kind of facing in the leadership teams. When you understand the technology capabilities, you understand that basically the gains are coming maybe after 5 years. And what is kind of the full opportunity? You can lead your product development to the right direction. You can lead the customer relation into the right direction. And I would say that kind of knowledge on the technology is the only difference. Otherwise, I would say that every business is a digital business for me. If they are not today, they will be tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agree. Any more questions, comments to Sanna?
Makes sense?
Everybody's happy.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you once again, Sanna, and we will continue to the next lecturer, who is Topias Uotila. And I think we have very nice title for this presentation, Fanfare for the Common Man. So Topias, are you a common man?
To a certain extent, I would say.
Okay, good. And you work as Senior Vice President
Yep.
in managed cloud, Nord Cloud.
Yeah.
So what you are actually doing over there, if I can ask?
Services, IT services that are delivered on a month-by-month basis rather than as individual projects.
Very good. And do you agree with Sanna that every business nowadays is a digital business?
Yes, that's why I raised my hand on the first question, but not on the second, because I think that they were likely both equally digital or at least becoming digital very fast.
Very good. Please, Topias, welcome and floor is yours.
Thank you. There's a topic or an issue that I've been worried about for about the last 5 years. And it's related directly to the explosion of digital technology in the world. And I think that the many digital technologies increase the level of abstractness in our society and the complexity. And the worry is related to the fact that since humans remain quite the same, is there a moment then when the complexity of your everyday life becomes larger than what the proverbial common man or the average person can handle? And maybe it doesn't even need to hit 50%, but if let's say 20% of the people are not able to cope with their everyday lives, I think the society might be in trouble. And Jarno basically already introduced me, but the name is Topias Uotila, and I run this continuous services business at a company called Nord Cloud. Very nice company. We're doing about 100 million in revenues currently and growing at a 50% rate, so that's a very, very fast-going services company. And I've actually been working with high-technology B2B services for my whole career. And last time I was in this hall, I was listening to a presentation on those seats about some SQL or some other topic like that. So I'm very happy to be on this side of the table for once, so thank you, Jarno, for inviting me here. The topics that I usually talk about are knowledge security, which is my own term that refers to the sort of psychological aspects of information security, all the way from like social engineering to different kind of propaganda campaigns and so on. And then I've been very active in following and studying quantum computing, which, by the way, we just hit a major milestone as a Google or basically NASA leaked a Google study that they would have achieved a quantum supremacy, which would mean that they have achieved a quantum computing device that is able to do something that no classical computing device can do. And that's, if you haven't followed the topic, it's something that might be like a really like a human race level achievement that will be remembered forever. So what I'm trying to do today, in terms of a story arc, we had a nice presentation from Sanna, thank you, and everybody was starting kind of happy. Then I started talking about my worries, and maybe we weren't that happy anymore. And then we hit an absolute low point because I was talking about myself. And now we're here with this cool picture of an arrow and everything is fine again. What I intend to do in this presentation is to walk you through 3 different scenarios in 3 different areas of life, all related to the personal life of a single person, and how I see possible futures in those areas that would really be so complex that it's arguable that maybe a normal person cannot handle it anymore. And then we will discuss the implications and resolve into despair or maybe to a more hopeful scenario. Everybody happy with this agenda? Good, because we are going to have the most interactive part next. The first scenario or topic is basically about security or the cybersecurity. And there are 2 terms that I would like to go through first. On the other hand, I would like to talk about attack surfaces. So all kinds of systems and environments and whatever you have in the digital realm that affects your life, but can also be accessed via some sort of network. Mostly it's internet, but it could be your 4G mobile network as well. And then I'm going to talk about digital identities, which basically means any username and password pair that you may have to any kind of application or website. And this is a series of questions to you. So That's the interactive part. Let's start. How many of you could actually make a list of all different systems and environments to which you have some sort of responsibility over its security? So you might have agreed to, for example, not share your password with your children, or you might have a work laptop that you're not allowed to anyone else use. So that sort of thing. So basically, how many of you could make a list of those systems? Hands up, please. There's maybe like 4 or 5 persons out of, so maybe like 10%. Okay, but it's only going to get harder. When you have gotten the access to these systems, there's probably some mandatory requirements that you need to fulfill to, do that part of the security that you are responsible for. How many of you would be able, if you were, let's say you were given the list of all those environments, how many of you would be able to list the mandatory things that you have agreed to do to secure those environments? Again, hands up. Maybe like 2 or 3 persons. What about all the voluntary things? What would be the best practice? So maybe the password doesn't need to be changed every 6 months, but it would kind of be best practice to change it. Or there are some updates that you should be checking every now and then, and how often that is. Would you be able to list those sort of voluntary things, but would be still best practice security for these systems? Hands up, please. So there's like maybe 2 persons. I suppose that the audience here is maybe a bit above average in their skills in the digital realm. So while I'm maybe talking more about future scenarios, I'm starting to get the feeling that even the current state is not, super good. Then if we move to the digital identities part, and let's ask there that not even listing those places, but do you know how many places you have a username and password combination to? Or does anybody know? Okay, at least one person supposes he knows. I thought I sort of knew, and then I started using a password manager, and I've ended up using it in a way that whenever I hit a username password prompt, I go to the password manager and check if I actually have existing account or not. And there are about like 50, 60 places that I might have the account to. And that's probably not all, because there might be things that I've registered to before I got this system. If you were given the list of all these places where you have the accounts to, would you be able to draw a network between them? So for example, if your Gmail account is your main email account, and if you reset the password on Amazon.com, the reset is handled through your Gmail account, so they are basically linked. The Gmail account is kind of like a master account for that Amazon accounts. And then you might have 2 different Google accounts on your 2 different mobile devices. So they are kind of linked. Google probably knows that you are the master of both of those. So would you be able to draw this graph where those are linked? If you can't, then basically if you lose the identity on one of these, you're not sort of able to know what is the implication. Would you know how to change the password in each one of these places? Or when did you last do that? Maybe that's part of the best practices that you would need to do. And would this time when you change the password be later or earlier than the latest leak from that current site? Like there was a leak on Lumin PDF, which our company security alerted me to. So that I knew, and that was like a couple of days ago, and so I did the reset and everything, but otherwise I wouldn't know. Now the final question to ask on this topic is do you think either one of these categories will become easier? Will the attack surface become smaller? Will you have less identities in the future? Or will this somehow be just, otherwise radically more simple? If you do, please raise your hand. So basically no one. So here we have a room full of people who are kind of already all saying that this thing, and I think all of these things are such that if your life depended on these systems and these identities, you would really need to manage these things. So we have a area of life which is already beyond our control. The complexity is too great for a normal person to handle. And I don't think it's becoming easier, at least not by accident. But let's look at the next scenario. And this one is about personal finances and the economy. And any handling of money, anybody in charge of their personal finances needs to handle four types of accounts in a way. There's the income, which is most commonly it might be your I'm not sure how it's called in English, but the government money that the student gets, or it might be your salary, which is the case, for example, for me. Then you have your expenses, which is historically the most complex one, because there you have people are buying all kinds of things, from food to gasoline for your car to paying your rent and buying clothes and so on. Then you have assets, so things that you own. And most commonly people just own their house or their apartment. There's really no other substantial assets. And to be able to buy this house before they can sort of save up the money, almost everybody needs to take a loan, so take some debt from a bank. So that's when the fourth area gets utilized. And if we think about this, running these four accounts and knowing what happens in those, that's crucial for anybody to know what they can afford, what sort of buying decisions they can make. Or for example, if they can accept a job that does not have the same salary than the previous job. And I think that here again, we already see many things that are already making this highly more complex than it used to be. First of all, the amount of people running a fixed normal salary that just increases by 2% a year is going down. You have Uber drivers that are also doing maybe Volt deliveries. You have people who are sort of forced to be entrepreneurs. You have people that only do these temporary assignments at work. So people don't have that fixed flow of money coming in. They need to be understanding how that varies and the risk that it implies for their money management. As mentioned, the expenses have always been like the most difficult one, the most complex one, but we can see complexity rising here as well. It's harder for people to manage the expenses when the money is less tangible, so you're not paying with cash, you're paying with a card, or you have a subscription to something that is just monthly automatically invoiced from your bank account. But also you might see things, or I'm expecting the share of energy to be a larger portion of everybody's expenses in the future. And it's also becoming more complex, so energy prices will vary by the hour or by the minute, and people will see this fluctuation in their own costs. They might even be partly producing the energy by having a solar panel on their roof, or at least on the shared roof of their apartment building, which makes the weather impact their expenses. Again, introducing more variance and risk. We have seen different kind of consumer spot loans happen already a long time ago, and this is like a recognized problem that people are not really good at managing this. We are, well, maybe this shouldn't be on the asset category, but we're anyway seeing insurance markets having more innovation, and much of this innovation, or at least the discussion around the innovation, is focused on tracking the behavior of individuals. So your auto insurance will be based on how you actually drive, which is of course fine. It's a good innovation. It probably brings the margins lower, but the ability, if you have a essentially a black box deep learning algorithm optimizing the insurance margin you need to pay to the insurance company, not even the company will understand why exactly you pay what you pay. The ability for the consumer to understand why his car insurance is going up is going to be practically zero. And then I sort of touched upon this already, and maybe it's not so much about the depth, but we also see a lot of innovation in the banking industry, and one of the things that might not exactly impact the flow of money, but brings a lot of the complexity is the disintegration of the vertical banking. So you will have the PSD2 change will bring these new service providers that are not really your bank, but are anyway automatically accessing your bank account and doing transactions for you, which makes it harder for a normal person to understand what is actually happening with their money, as you have more players interacting with those. But I would say that most of these, maybe apart the insurance part and the energy prices, has already quite far. The thing that I used to like subtitle this part of the presentation was the radical markets, and this is a very interesting idea from actually Microsoft research, and they've looked at this. They sort of looked at what ownership means, and they realized that ownership is a sort of monopoly. If you own a car, you are the only one who gets to decide what to do with that car. And that's not a problem. You can buy and sell that, but that's not a very efficient market. And in most common scenarios, it doesn't matter at all. But let's say somebody is trying to build a traditional railroad or a cool hyperloop track somewhere. You would need to buy all the pieces of land on the path of your new track. And then it becomes a problem that you don't actually know at what price you can acquire those pieces of land. And then I think there are more than one Western movie where somebody knows that the railroad is coming through this part and I'm going to hold on to my farm, because they're not really looking to get the money from the farm, which is the value of the farm, for themselves, but rather that they know that they are the only ones blocking the whole railway, and they know that they will get like a premium on that lot. And then so this then leads to the fact that these some properties, some things that are owned, are not allocated efficiently. So it's a societal loss, and it can actually be a quite staggering loss. And the thing that the guys are proposing in their book is that there should actually be a sweeping change where taxation could be based on ownership. And then it would be maybe 1% of the value of all the assets that you own. But the person himself or herself declares what is the value. So you can say that my house is worth 100,000, and then you pay 1,000 in taxes every year for that house. Now the temptation is of course then to say that your house is worth only 100 euros, so the tax goes really much down. But there's the catch, which is that you have to sell the house to anybody with the price that you have set. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but with the technology that we have at hand, and with the fact that there's quite a lot of value in society locked up because we don't have such a market, something like this might happen. And there's of course then the tremendous cost is on the side of the individual. How will an individual work in a society where they would really need to keep track of the actual value to themselves of all of their assets, so that somebody doesn't surprisingly come and buy them out of their own house. And as we touched on the blockchain, one additional thing sort of covering all of these, that even if just Bitcoin becomes more popular and it starts to be in everyday use, this will expose all the normal people in all the normal jobs in their lives to currency risk, which is basically something that hasn't been around a lot since the beginning of the Euro era. And then the first time this was introduced in the late 80s, when the Finnish mark, the Finnish citizens were able to get loans in other currencies, we ended up with a lot of personal strategies. So we have kind of proved 20 years ago, more than 30 years ago, that it's not an easy topic for people to handle. Okay, so those were the two scenarios. So the third one, real-time big data micro-target deepfakes. I really love these topics because you get to do all the buzzwords. But the idea here is to look at more of a society, maybe political landscape area with the last scenario, and I think this is a convergence of these kind of technologies. So you are probably familiar with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and the sort of big data analytics approach that they had for well, you could say hacking elections, but anyway, like inserting influence on people based on their emotions and their personal data. And if you haven't, I actually have another talk on that. You can find it on YouTube. But that was kind of like static, based on likes and so on. Then at the same time you have, for example, the Spotify CTO explained very nicely how they are not just a company serving the consumer who's listening to music, but they also want to serve the music artist and the podcast producer by providing very detailed analytics. So for example, is there a point in your song or your podcast where everybody stops listening? Is there a point that is always repeated? Is there a point where somebody always turns up the volume? And like get to this level where you can actually compose songs based on historic data on how people behave. And this has been like very logical and something that we have gotten quite used to in let's say mobile gaming, where this sort of metrics of how the feedback to buying different virtual goods is instantly used to tune the offering. But the same thing can happen in Spotify, and also YouTube is working on similar topics. Then we have the fact that the more and more of the content that we're consuming is of course video, but it's also more and more streamed video. Which means that a lot of the video generation and delivery is real time. In addition to what we had with the sort of analysis of your likes, we have companies, including also Google and Microsoft, who have tools to analyze not just your likes, but your written text for emotions, your expressions for emotions, and sentiment analysis, as they call it. And at the same time, we have new kinds of machine learning technologies, for example, what OpenAI is doing with the GANs, or the generative adversarial networks, on where content can be automatically created based on data. And then finally we have the nice, funny face swap apps and the deep fake theme. That, for example, many of you probably saw the one that Yle did on President Niinistö, and that was basically, I think, done on a laptop with the Face app program, which is, I think, kind of old and probably not the state-of-the-art model. But I would, if you haven't, and if you have still, I would like to show you a video of what it looks like with maybe more hardware or more, fine-tuned algorithms.
Here's the very funny Bill Hader, ladies and gentlemen. It seemed like every movie I saw in the last several months, you were in it, and good for you. That's just great.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
And I was wondering about the Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, Tropic Thunder.
Where Tom Cruise. You're working with Tom Cruise. What was that experience like?
It was amazing. Like we got to dance together. That was amazing. We had when you do a movie, you do table reads, where like all the actors get together.
At the beginning of the
production? Beginning, before anything, you get together and you read through the script. And so it's like, all these heavyweights, like, Ben Stiller, Jack Black, Robert Downey Jr., everybody. And at the end is like me, like, hey. Just happy to be here, guys. And some other supporting guys, and then Tom Cruise walks in,
my God.
And even those guys are like, whoa, and he's super stoked to be there, just like, yeah, oh, boom, he's like, wow, he's just immediately excited when he walks into a room. And so he comes over and he sits next to me, and I think he had been briefed on some of the supporting guys, but he was like trying to place me, you know? So he sat down next to me, he's like, I love your work. And I went, oh, thanks. I love your work too, Tom Cruise. You know, like, thanks. And I go, yeah, you know, I'm friends with Judd Apatow and Seth Rogen, and they went to your house. He went, yes. They did come to my house. And I said, Seth Rogen was like, you know, it was amazing. He has like a bike track in his backyard. It's phenomenal. and I did a Seth Rogen impression, and it was like I did a magic trick. Tom Cruise was like, yeah. Wow. And he points to me. And he pointed at me and he goes, you do impressions and you're on Saturday Night Live. And I went, hey. It was like he won a game show. He was like, yeah, Tom.
I think that when I at least watched the one that Yle had done, you kind of thought that you still are able to figure out that it's a fake. I think I saw, I'm not sure if this was the same one or another one from the same author, but it took me a while to actually understand that, like no, that guy actually didn't look like Tom Cruise in the beginning. Like what has happened here? And I also think that the really sort of impressive part in this video, at least, is that he does these very elaborate facial expressions. Like he goes like, and still the sort of the image doesn't break at all. It's really hard to like even on second watching see that there's some clear manipulation going on. And also I think it's a good example because it fades in and out with those faces, so you also see the transition happening. And so the convergence of these technologies that I'm actually afraid of, or what worries me in this area is kind of like you're there on Snapchat, you're looking at that video, and there's the other camera looking at you. And the combination of these technologies is at some point going to enable them to alter the Snapchat video based on the emotions on your face. So let's say they want to, of course, they first of all want to keep you interested. So they kind of notice that you're maybe not so interested anymore. You're starting to look like you are about to swipe away or pause the video. They change the content. They have a couple of examples maybe from your Facebook likes, saying that these are the things you could be interested in, but then they also just test something. They start to talk about some other topic and see how you react, and then again they can alter that on the fly. And of course, doing this with the vicious mindset, trying to do something evil, that's like an obvious threat. But even if there is no malicious intent, even if it's just a service that you basically know is kind of like an AI that's talking to you or a generated face. Or maybe it's some marketing thing that is completely legal, there's nothing foul play going on there. Even that just makes the complexity of actually understanding what is real and what is not so much harder than it is today. And this is a great stretch, but the one way of looking at this could be that combining all of these trends is that you kind of own something, you don't even know how much that's worth, somebody steals that away from you by capturing your identity, and when you find out, they explain it to you in a way that you're not even angry. However, there's another side of this story. Almost nobody. Well, let's do another question. Has somebody in this audience read the Finnish law from cover to cover? No, but still you're doing quite fine. Many people, including myself, don't really know how the voting system works on that level that I could now explain it on the blackboard, that this is how the votes are counted and this is how all the seats are then divided up. Most people don't really know about how banks create money, or they don't think about it, that they might not even be on top of their own mortgage. And if we go back to history, at some point humans invented religion, and that's by definition, it's a very abstract concept and a very abstract definition of things and rules you need to know. And if you didn't know them, they might burn you as a witch. So it's kind of crucial also to know that. But people did learn them. And even the idea of, let's say separating the spread of information from the movement of people is a great abstraction. And that might have been hard to grasp. As well as, of course, even though I did study computer science, and I sort of had this idea when I began to study it, that I really wanted to understand how electricity turns into a 3D game. I wouldn't be able now to explain what is the sort of all the steps between the slide set and the electricity coming from the outlet. But still, it works. And the common things to all of these are that they are all inventions by humans, as are the things that I explained, the first 3 scenarios. They are all complex, and they all have this abstract character, so they are not tangible things. And civilization has obviously survived all of them. One could even argue that civilization has been created through inventions such as these. And millions love them. Well, maybe not millions love computers, but at least the benefits that they get from those. And I could have been here before they went mainstream and been similarly worried about the advent of any one of these technologies. So perhaps the common man is actually a superhero. They are able to cope so well with these changes. But there's also the other viewpoint that yes, maybe the common man or the average person is a superhero and can do amazing things, and I agree. Probably we all can, because this is not about the common person being someone else than us here. Although I mentioned we're probably experts on some of these fields more than others, but we are all sort of average on different parts of life. The other thing that is happening with this is something that I've also mentioned. They're all abstract, but they're also abstractions of something. And the abstraction is basically it's a simplification. It's a higher level description of something that is highly complex. And it's me pushing this button to go to the next slide. I don't know. I don't need to care about all the steps in between, how this translates into the computer and how the computer is able to know what to show next and how all the images come to the screen. And it's at the whole concept of abstraction is of course at the core of most engineering work. You can't really do any systems on a level that engineers nowadays work or already have been working for hundreds of years unless you're able to abstract away some of the underlying details. But sort of the last point on this slide is that it's not just a way to cope, that you hide away the complexity and then you're sort of able to move forward. It's also really unlocking the value. And one way of looking at any sort of platform economy innovation is that it's an abstraction. That's really what makes it possible to create the value. And again, this might be a bit stretching, but you can also look at it in a way that nowadays you have too many friends for your brains. So Facebook helps with that, keeping track of those contact details. There's more material on the internet created every hour than anybody can read in their lifetime. So Google helps abstract away that complexity. And the digital identities I was talking about, both of these companies and all the banks are trying to help us cope with those digital identities and are at least partly succeeding. And for the commercial break, even though we're a B2B services company, we kind of looked at this a bit when we were doing our strategy as well. And it's maybe a more positive way of talking about this complexity is to talk about an automated world. And we think that part of our strategy needs to be that we help people to really thrive in such an automated world. And so I would like to leave you with the point that remember to celebrate the common man. That's also at the core of any good design work. but please join in and kill the complexity that we all share, because that's the way to unlock really big value. Thank you. Questions, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Very interesting, Topias. I have to first ask you one question, hearing your lecture here. Very good presentation. When we are talking about the digitalization in this public lecture series, and we are talking about the humans as well in technological era. So when you are thinking about this common man, or even Superman, like you presented it, what would you say? And I know that you have very long experience about these issues. That what are the basic skills that we people should have nowadays?
I think that the one way of looking at what I was presenting is that it's sort of very hard to try for like this. At least the common is going to be quite low anyway. Like people need to specialize, they need to be experts in something, and then they will invariably be very average on the other stuff. And that's why you can't sort of expect as some area increases in complexity so that everybody would learn more about that. You somehow need to be able to drag that complexity back to something that is learnable. And it needs to be learnable quite fast. And while of course the designers of those systems and these areas will help there a lot, I think one of the greatest skills for anybody to have is to have the ability, of course, to learn fast, because even if the things that are coming out are more simple than they could have been, still there will be a lot of changes. So the ability to learn fast is something. Otherwise, it's really hard to say for me any sort of specific skills like which might carry like a name of a technology or some even a area of science, like everybody should know biology. I don't know if that means anything. So it's about the ability to learn fast, and then I think we all have the potential, as we saw from the historic examples, to understand very abstract things, but we just need to have like enough stability, enough safety, and the time to learn those things. But that's I think the ability to understand abstract concepts and the ability to learn are maybe the two things that I'm talking about mostly in here. And then going to what you really need to learn in school, maybe that's not something I'm an expert on or haven't studied lately.
Thank you, Topias. Questions, comments? And please wait for the mic so we will get the questions to the internet as well from the common man.
Thank you very much for the rather interesting and somewhat abstract presentation. But as abstract as it might seem, in a more generic way, what do you think is the next level of development of the common man with respect to all these things you have enumerated during the course of this presentation?
So if I try to reiterate a bit, you're asking like how do I see that the common man will change? And as far as I understand that, it's sort of like the common man doesn't really change as much. So we almost are exactly what we were 100 years ago. So even if there's some development there on like a biological level, that's like we can assume that that's basically zero. Then we have the evolution through to like environmental factors, including like education, and that of course depends on a lot on what people do study. And having kids of my own, it's at least very nice to see that also much of the entertainment for kids has really, they live with the times very well. So most of the Donald Ducks have, you know, stories about augmented reality. They have, you know, fake news, a type of scenarios where somebody is running a newspaper and trying to fool other people, and all kinds of those things. So I think that the sort of like just going through the basic education, people will develop together with the society and with technology, but the technology cannot really increase in complexity a lot. If that happens, if something here, if some of the complexity that I've sort of urged everyone to join in to tackle, if it's impossible to tackle and that complexity actually comes and gets to be mandatory in the everyday life, then I don't know what will actually happen to society. If we have like 25% of people who are no longer able to know what they can afford or secure their own assets or know what is you know, true or right or wrong, then I don't. It's really hard to say what the implication for society would be.
Okay, Topias, I have one more.
Okay.
Not the easy one, sorry. If you would give the same presentation under the same title after 5 years in Aalto University in this lecture series, so 224, what would be your different message?
So in 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. So I think that I think that the structure and the sort of basic message could be the same, because I think that this problem has sort of probably been created like at least in the 1950s. Back then you could have already argued that there's so much technological progress happening that it's hard to cope with that, with the at least somewhat modern banking system and all of that happening. So I think the structure and the basic idea might be the same, and there will be a new set of learners that can be encouraged to look at the world from this perspective. But naturally the examples would have changed. I think that there's maybe more of this automated world type of topics that might be there. Sort of like more and more things, and maybe even this kind of what is called like intelligent fog. So computing being ingrained in every aspect of our environment, and how that makes also the understanding of reality and what is actually happening and what is sort of provided by machines a lot more difficult. Whereas in all of these scenarios, the assumption is still kind of like that you're this person living in a home which has walls and is sort of not automated, and then you interact with things that become complex. But then in 5 years, it might be very close to us that actually the whole physical environment is already ingrained with digital technology, and it's hard to separate them in any sense.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much, Topias.
Thank you.
Sanna as well. We will finish this week's lecture series, and we will continue next week, same place, same time, and sorry, not same place. Actually, it's the lecture hall, that direction, 26 meters, approximately. Okay, good. Thank you.